I've used the shark attack metaphor previously to describe men's quite right reluctance to get back into the water. And it made me think of a corollary just to add to that. Notice how a gynocentric society, when a surfer who's been mauled or even lost a leg gets back into the water, most people will think, what an idiot. I wouldn't do that, because they can see themselves on the beach, getting in the waves, going into the surf and not wanting to risk that small chance of a shark attacking them. Yet, when you look at the greater risk of men either getting into marriages for the second time, getting into long-term relationships, the very real and huge risks of it failing again and him losing a lot, doesn't it tell you something about the gynocentric sympathy or lack thereof, the empathy that they lack, because they can't see themselves risking anything? Think about it. They will quite easily ridicule the surfer for going back out on the waves after experiencing a massive loss, as in a shark attack, because they themselves have been to the beach. They themselves want to go back into the water. But when men are reluctant to go back into the water, as it were, they can't fathom why a man wouldn't go back into the water and risk being attacked by a shark. Do you understand? It just shows the lack of empathy, because gynocentrism doesn't have to face that risk, and they can't understand why the male surfer wouldn't just want to go back into the water and risk it again. I mean, doesn't he love surfing that much that he'd risk it? I found it an interesting corollary to why men don't go back into the water, as it were, in terms of relationships and especially marriage, and the unempathic disconnect of women and gynocentrism. You know, it's funny, even though men don't know the experience of women, men can quite rightly understand that going through the arduous process of incubating a baby, bringing it to term, delivering a baby, even though we don't do it, we can abstractly put ourselves and empathise with another person and sympathise and think, that'd be pretty hard. I understand in some way. I can envisage what you might be going through. But it's quite funny that the gynocentric system can't envisage what a male surfer might be going through in risking going back out into the waves and surfing again. Yet they would quite easily understand when anyone who quite literally experienced a shark attack is hesitant to get back into the water, and they would see nothing wrong with that person. In fact, they would consider him quite rational and sane. Whereas the figurative surfer, who's been mauled by the female and gynocentric sharks out there, when he's reluctant to get back into the water, he's shamed. And it's because the gynocentric female system can't empathize, because they're not in that situation. They will never get mauled by a shark. Only the male surfer will, so to speak. So you'll need to forgive us PTSD retired surfers who no longer want to get into shark-infested waters when we're given advice by the sharks, when we're shamed by the sharks to get back into the water. Now, what's interesting to me is that the predators are shaming men to come back into the predatory environment. I mean, you could parallel the traumatized ex-surfer who's been attacked by a shark or lost a limb to the war veteran as well, and shaming them to get back into the battlefield. You know, the lack of sympathy for a person's traumatic lived experience really opens the eyes to a lot of men. And that lack of sympathy from the non-male, the non-man out there, the inability to empathize and place yourself in the other person's shoes and realize. So it's this pitiless lack of empathy that men have just said, you know what, why should I care if you don't? If you can't at least see my point of view and what I'm worried about, then I don't care. And you can shame men all you like, but until you can actually be kind and look at things from another person's very legitimate point of view and concern, then men are just going to continue to disappear. And whether that's the plan of the system to get rid of the strong intellectual male provider is beside the point, because in my life, I would like some sort of fulfillment and meaning. If men can't at least retain some sensible portion of the effort they've put forward, then men quite sensibly just won't take that risk, and neither would anybody else, let's be honest. No matter how much a male loves surfing, so to speak, there comes a point where if he's been attacked by a shark or two, there comes a point where the desire to surf just isn't worth the risk, and it just kind of fades off. Living on land in peaceful solitude seems a lot more attractive, and he'd rather live his days out there rather than risking them out on the waves. You're not being paranoid, guys. You're being sensible and taking care of your own safety. So don't be afraid of not getting back into the water, gentlemen. There's no shame. The saying, once bitten, twice shy? Gentlemen, if you don't want to surf anymore, it's not your problem, it's theirs. I think it was one of the Stoics, either Seneca or Epictetus, who said, be wary of people who are pushing you to do something where they incur no risk. Anyway, something to think about in terms of being shamed to risk more than other people are willing to. I hope that was something to chew on. Later, gentlemen.
If you appreciate my content and want to say thank you, feel free to donate via the links below. It really helps me out. And share, link, like, comment, subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of my next videos. Thanks guys.